I don't understand why people think block is better. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, the explosion is cool, and the stats are nice, it's just not better than fencing in my experience. I rarely get a chance to actually use its explosive ability, and as someone who is currently leveling up Assault, I'm almost 25, using Thunderhammer, I'd much rather have the armor from Perfect Parry Gunstrike, from the perk. The non-finisher Gunstrikes give you armor. That is a pretty good perk, I do admit. Or even just from parrying a gaunt, can someone please explain to me why some people prefer blocking over fencing? Alright, so in my experience, blocking just is more impactful. Fencing is good. I know fencing is good. And yes, the non-finisher Gunstrike armor perk is really good with fencing, and that's practically how you should build the Assault. But I will say, balance. Balance is likely just a little bit better than fencing for Assault, and just frankly put, just because of the little extra damage you get from it. Not to mention, if you're good at parrying, you can definitely parry with balance anyway. But yeah, when it comes to blocking, I think blocking is just edging out fencing at the moment because of, it's easier to get the explosive ability now. And there's actually more enemies that can hit you twice if you consider minors, because the shield and sword guys, the Zangors from Chaos, if you are surrounded by them, it's really easy to get your blocking stacks up to 2. Same goes for Gaunts, same goes for Tyranid Warriors. The only mobs that don't attack you with consecutive melee attacks are like Sorcerers, Chaos Rubric Marines, but they can still hit you with melee attacks to get your blocking stacks up. So there's actually quite a bit of options when it comes to getting your stacks up to 2. Now, in my experience, at least what's been happening to me is I've been getting surrounded by majors, and if I go for a parry and a gunstrike, I'm still going to get hit by the major that's like behind me or something like that, right? Basically trying to find opportunities to capitalize on your parrying. It's really weird in Absolute because you can get surrounded, you can go for a gunstrike and get hit, and yeah, if you don't have the non-finisher gunstrike perk, you are taking pretty large amounts of damage just to get a gunstrike off. And with blocking, you can just block a couple times. As soon as you hit, you get your armor back. You don't need a perk for it. You get an explosive ability that pushes everyone back. For Assault especially, I feel like the blocking Thunderhammer is definitely the way to go. You guys are going to have to let me know in the comments how you guys feel about this. But I've been talking about blocking versus fencing quite a bit recently. And to me, it's just a lot easier to trade with blocking. That's basically how I put it. Devs buffed it again and downed the number of blocks you need to 2. So there's no excuse for not getting the explosion, but generally it just depends on what class and what perks. If you like the armor perk on Assault, don't use block hammer. I use the balanced hammer. Yeah, the balanced thunder hammer is really good. I also use that. The balanced thunder hammer is just best of both worlds. You get a good amount of damage, and you can also, do your parrying and get the, obviously get the gun strikes, get your armor back. Yeah, it makes sense. If you're using all the parry perks on Bulwark, obviously don't take a block weapon. On Vanguard, with his increased perfect parry block window perk, taking the insane damage of the block knife or chainsword alongside a Melta, it's unbelievable damage. And yeah, he's right about this. The Melta with a blocking combat knife is such a good build for the Vanguard. The block sword on Tactical is also pretty dang great. With the scan on perfect parry block perk, it makes it every melee fight end in seconds. I've been using the Artificer block sword due to its insane speed, and it's doing +1 more damage than the Relic fencing sword. Oddly fantastic weapon. The Artificer blocking chainsword is definitely a really good weapon. It's definitely oddly good because it's an Artificer. It's an Artificer weapon, but it's like the fastest weapon in the game. It's kind of insane. But yeah, the fact that you only need 2 blocks to get to max stacks and, ultimately giving out massive amounts of damage with that, it's much more convenient to use now than it used to be. And as soon as you get good with using blocking, like as soon as you understand what combos you want to block and how to block them, you can really just start stacking up your max stacks super fast, dude, especially against Tyranids. They, like, to get 2 stacks, most of the times you're over blocking because they're throwing like 4 to 5 attacks at you. And again, with blocking, you can just sit there and block all the attacks, and as soon as you can find an opening, you can just push them all back. It's really good for positioning because of how much you push the enemies back. With that explosive attack, you can practically push back an entire mob that's surrounding you and get them all in front of you, because you can just dodge out of the way, and then you basically dodge out of the surrounding the mobs that's surrounding you, dodge out of that circle and try to get them in front of you. That's one of the best ways to handle blocking when you push back a whole bunch of enemies. It really comes down to playstyle preference. I've been using fencing since launch, but I was starting to get a bit bored of constantly parrying this and that. When they introduced the blocking weapons rework, I decided to try the block Thunderhammer and haven't looked back since. For Tyranid operations, a block Thunderhammer can execute warriors with just a ground pound. With 2 charges, a ground pound can either outright kill warriors, including shielded bone swords, as the explosion staggers them out of shield, and ripe for the rest of the buffed ground pound. It can also put lictors and raveners into execute, if not delete them instantly if they've taken any damage prior. The higher damage stat means fewer hits or combos to kill. You can weave in dodges and block stacks to deal with groups of warriors and kill them faster than with fencing. But what I value most isn't just the damage. It's how using block has allowed me to experience the game in a completely different way. Instead of standing still and parrying my way through most situations, I've learned enemy attack patterns in full, figured out how to perfect dodge for gun strikes, and using that knowledge of timing to use jump pack dash regularly and without Wings of Flame perk at all. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah. If you're good at perfect dodging, blocking is a really good option for you. I've learned that melee magers have a 3 pattern attack that allows me to get 2 block stacks and a perfect dodge. I use a quick aftershock to deal with the hordes of gaunts to keep armor up, because I can't just parry my bars up to full. But you don't need to do or think about any of that when you can just parry this and parry that. Plus, now I know enemy attack patterns. I'm much better at getting perfect dodges with other classes. For example, I can perfect dodge through zoanthrope beams with the heavy, all because I practice timings with assault. Well, yeah, that's that's actually a pretty good note. Well, yeah, perfect dodging zoanthrope beams are a pain. That said, I don't use block outside of Assault's Thunderhammer. Again, blocking and fencing are just personal preferences. For all the other classes, I still prefer fencing. I find it the most enjoyable for classes, much like how I find the block Thunderhammer for Assault the most fun. I mean, yeah, that's fair. Whatever you're good at playing with, that is definitely what you should gravitate towards. Yeah, the 3 attack pattern from the Tyranid warriors are definitely super easy. I mean, the whip Tyranids, the bone sword Tyranids, they all give you some really good combos to block. The thing is, I value the damage the most. This person said they didn't value the damage more so. They just valued the extra experience, you know, the new experience, more so than the damage, and I think that's interesting as well. So if you find yourself getting a little bit bored of fencing, I think this is the perfect time to learn blocking. I feel like blocking is going to be very, very good in Horde mode, just because of the area of effect damage you can output with it. Ground pound scales with your melee damage, and a block variant Thunderhammer can one-shot even some extremist enemies with full stacks. Thunderhammer, and especially Power Fist, can benefit a lot from overcharge, in which case parries are only getting you more armor versus Minoris, whereas a block weapon will get you more armor versus Majoris, plus faster executes. Generally, killing things faster gives them less opportunities to damage you. Yeah. The only benefit of a parry playstyle is that it's more forgiving. You'll be dealing significantly less damage, but it'll be easier to defend yourself and keep your armor up, assuming you take the armor reinforcement perk, which is the non-lethal gunstrike perk. But yeah, see, you practically have to build around fencing. If you're comfortable enough with the block playstyle that you're able to manage hordes without taking much of any damage, you'll get better mileage out of a block weapon, but many players prefer parry weapons as they give you a bit more leeway when you're overwhelmed. I mean, yeah, he's kind of right about that. The thing is, you can definitely use some charge attacks to deal with those overwhelming mobs. And as far as overwhelming mobs, I mean like overwhelming gaunts and stuff like that. So charge attacks is definitely good just to damage the area and do your best to keep from being overwhelmed by mobs. But still, you can get really easy stacks with blocking against gaunts. It's really just when you are low health and taking a lot of chip damage. That's when blocking is kind of rough. When you have low health, blocking is a little bit dangerous because you are essentially still playing very aggressive. This is a fair point. Definitely let me know in the comments how you guys feel about fencing versus blocking right now. At the moment, it does feel like blocking's just a little bit more. There's a little bit more advantage of getting good with blocking than compared to fencing, at least in my opinion. Just because I've been playing a lot of blocking against the Hive Tyrant as well. You can kind of I play blocking against the Hive Tyrant and parry the Hive Tyrant. The damage you can output from a blocking Thunderhammer at 2 stacks with a ground slam is insane against the Hive Tyrant. It's really hard to replace that with a fencing build. I mean, your gun strikes are going to do pretty good damage, right? But nothing beats like just chunking off like a half of the health bar of the Hive Tyrant